Thank you everyone for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us here for the charting of Calgary's low-carbon future. My name is Jeff Reading, and my buddy here is Carrie Booth. We are both with the City of Calgary's Community Energy Initiative.
If you have any questions, anyone who is wearing a neon green name tag is in the know and can actually help direct you and answer any of the queries that you may have.
Ecological footprint for Calgary is one of the things that we are working on. 56% of Calgary's ecological footprint is attributed to energy consumption. So consequently, looking at how we make changes and how we consume energy is the best way for us to get some opportunities around reducing our footprint, reducing GHG, and looking at greenhouse gases and looking at some of the things around climate change and sustainability. Our quality of life, our economic prosperity, our social structures, and general environmental quality are at risk. We need to start thinking about how we do things differently from the status quo. And a unique opportunity exists right now to roll together all the different actions, energies, and enthusiasms that exist here in Calgary, across Canada, and indeed around the world. So we're going to try and tap into that today and see if we can leverage some of the activity into local actions here. And Mayor Dave Brown-Kanye is here this morning to talk a little bit about that. So Dave Brown-Kanye is a 3-term mayor of Calgary. He's known as one of the most innovative and articulate leaders in Canada today. He's credited with successfully and decisively leading Calgary through a rapid period of growth. And now he's providing leadership towards trying to encourage that growth builds on a sustainable future going forward and ensures Calgary's position as a global energy center. Dave and I live in the same community, so I can tell you from personal experience that he's a strong community member, a great parent, and a good friend. In 2006, Calgary was chosen amongst 23 nominated cities to receive a prestigious World Leadership Award in the environmental category. Mayor Brown-Kanye moved to put in place new revenues, new policies, new projects and procedures that will help Calgary to make sure they hold their proper spot in the world. And today, as we consider the future in charting Calgary's low-carbon future, we're looking to him for some leadership in that regard. So please join me in welcoming Mayor Dave Brown-Kanye.
Ladies and gentlemen, friends, Alderman Pincott and I are very pleased to join you this morning, along with members supported by the province of Alberta and the various ministries that are here, members of Edmonton's local government that are also joining us, as well as Medicine Hat and those involved in the energy industry. If you want to be a little bit philosophical, this is a gorgeous building, the Heritage Hall, that is going through major expansion. And in this day in history, in 1789, and George Washington laid the first stone for the Capitol building. So if you sort of think through about building and the foundations of where we're going with democracy, also noted in the first day in this day in history, in the late 1700s, the United States government did something that was really different. They issued their first borrowing bylaw. The only interesting part about that is that they issued it, of course, to pay the salaries of the presidents and the politicians. So, you know, some things don't change when you start looking at history, but other things do. This facility here at SAIT is certainly well regarded in Calgary, as you will hear from a number of speakers, and the type of projects and people that attend SAIT, and of course putting on the World Skills event that just occurred in our city. It was leadership at its finest. And I believe that that's what we're here to do today when we start this summit off, speaking about charting the low-carbon footprint agenda. So ladies and gentlemen, when we meet, we are certainly in uncharted and unprecedented and then sometimes uncertain times in the world. But there are two issues that dominate the public policy agenda. First and foremost is the economy. Every person you speak to, it's on their mind, whether they be in business or whether they be employed in a business. And the second one that's dominating the agenda and that we're here to speak about today is the environment, specifically dealing with the challenges of greenhouse gases. By 2030, the world's energy needs are expected to increase by over 50% of today's demands. Well, at the same time, scientists around the world are calling for an 80% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. And I think the challenge is reconciling demands while simultaneously adapting to a changing economic climate and the social and environmental implications that face them is one of the most important public policy challenges that are faced on a global perspective. In just 3 months' time, leaders around the world will gather in Copenhagen, Denmark, to discuss global measures for environmental sustainability. Their goal is to ratify a worldwide greenhouse gas reduction targets to replace the Kyoto Agreement, which expires. There is no doubt that this will be a key policy decision that will shape the world for decades to come. Calgary is a member of the World's Energy City Partnership, a group of 15 energy-producing cities from around the globe that play a key leadership role. And in October 8th of this year, 2009, that group will gather right here in our city for their annual general meeting. And the plan, of course, is to sign the World Energy City's Calgary Climate Change Accord, our municipal contribution to the Copenhagen discussion that will take place 2 months later. The WECP and Calgary Climate Change Accord will outline our group as 15 city leaders at reducing greenhouse gas emissions by a minimum of 20% by 2020, with a further reduction by 80% by 2050 compared to 2005. Now, the policies chosen to address the carbon emissions absolutely will have profound implications on our city and our province and on our country. Indeed, as an energy city, one might believe that as a community we've got the most to lose, but in fact, I believe that we've got the most to gain, the most to win by setting these policies. You see, Calgary's goal from an economic perspective is to become a global center for all things energy, traditional as well as renewable. And as one scans the globe, there are very few cities that are better positioned to actually deliver on that goal. We have the corporate infrastructure, we've got the talented people that reside here, the know-how to spear development and the commercialization of technology, which will improve our energy efficiencies and the advancement of green technology, while at the same time coexisting and working with the traditional methods that are used today. Our citizens expect municipal governments to lead by example, and I can assure you we are. We are committed as a corporation to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 50% from our 1990 to 2012. I can share with you that we are well on track to not only meeting that objective, but we will exceed it. As a municipality, we are the largest user of renewable energy in Canada, and arguably the second largest in North America. By 2012, the City of Calgary operations will all be 100% renewable electricity. Calgary's light rail transit that runs just outside these doors continues to be a source of pride for our community. Not only is network expansion underway, moving commuters and people alike, but it's also the fact that it's the first public transit system in North America 100% powered by wind. Through our wholly owned subsidiary, ENMAX Corporation, which provides natural gas and electricity to over 500,000 customers, we are developing wind, solar, and heat to electricity generation that'll build our clean energy capacity for our municipal government and community-wide operations. You see, it is our belief that through this and many other projects that your local government, that we are showing the way in terms of innovation, leadership, and progressive thinking in reducing the emissions associated with our city operations, and we'd like to encourage others to join in these efforts. This is why today's summit this morning is so important to each of us. Your efforts to help guide and drive the policies and the programs that all communities, all Albertans can be part of. Global actions require global results. Every person living in a village, a hamlet, a town, or even its largest city, we cannot make this happen alone. It will require each and every one of us, whether they be at the summit here this morning or whether they be in their own home or business later today. So on behalf of the organizers, and I want to thank the Carbon Footprint Advisory Team and Group for their efforts. I'd like to welcome you to the summit this morning. We look forward to hearing your ideas later today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for articulating the fact that Calgary indeed perhaps has the most to gain and to lose trying to address actions to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. And as an energy city, we are indeed in a unique position to be global leaders in promoting those kinds of technologies. Our efforts through the World Energy Cities Partnership that'll occur here in the next few weeks shows this type of leadership. And our work with Alberta Environment and all the efforts of the participants that are here today are vital to the success of our community's greenhouse gas reduction strategy and programs. So thank you very much. So we're very pleased this morning to be sitting in the SAIT atrium. Reese is the principal investigator of SAIT's biofuels projects and program. Working with the Department of Applied Research and Innovation Services, he provides solutions to industry in relation to biofuel technologies. By collaborating with industry, professionals, and other research partners, Reese is furthering to improve SAIT's biodiesel processor to make it not only more energy efficient, but also to have an even reduced environmental impact. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Reese Winter.
Our institution is passionate about a sustainable future and committed to giving our students and faculty the opportunity to not only be a part of a sustainable future, but also to help create it. The majority of our innovation research comes from the Applied Research Department, which involves industry partners, faculty, and also staff. The Department of Applied Research was founded in 1999, and during this time it was very unusual for technical institutes to be involved with applied research projects. Generally at this time, this kind of applied research work was considered the realms of university only, but SAIT, having known what innovation it can bring to the campus, decided to fight for it. SAIT's School of Hospitality and Tourism and also the Applied Research Department has combined with the goal to reduce the school's environmental footprint and demonstrate leadership in sustainability. This project involves the on-campus production of biodiesel fuel. The fuel is then on-sold to Greenway Fuels, which is Alberta's first biodiesel retail station down there in Turner Valley. Waste cooking oils from the culinary school and also from the restaurants on campus are used as the feedstock. The waste oils reacted with alcohol to produce the biodiesel fuel. SAIT Energy students are involved with the testing to ensure a commercially saleable product. The Green Building Technology Applied Research Program was created to develop a net standard certification for Western Canada. These homes will provide as much energy as they will consume and optimise water and waste consumption as well as indoor air quality. The average home produces about 12 tonnes of CO2 equivalent emissions annually. If only 1% of these houses use the technology which is being displayed in SAIT's solar decathlon house, which you can see on the intersection of 16th and 14th in the top corner of our campus, CO2 emissions would be reduced 15,000 tonnes per year.
One of the challenges I think that educational institutions have in training future generations of students is when students graduate, half of what they know will be obsolete. A lot of the jobs that they will have when they emerge don't even exist yet. So it's quite a dilemma for postgraduate institutions to be able to effectively train our students to deal with some of the innovative challenges that we've got going forward. I think SAIT is an excellent example of some of the things that can be done, particularly on the trade side, particularly on some of the alternative ways of looking at how we consume energy side. And it's really great to see that we've got that kind of a facility here in Calgary. So Reese, thank you very much.
Before we get into the work that you'll be doing as the participants, what we'd like to do is just give you an overview of the objectives for today and offer some context for what the results of the summit will mean. Today is about innovation and implementation, about taking action together. Everything we need to know is in this room. Staying on a course that is the status quo will compromise our quality of life. Our economic prosperity, our social structures, and our health are all at stake. Today is also about showing leadership.
Locally, there's a whole bunch of initiatives that are supported by what you're doing today. Not to mention Imagine Calgary and Planet. But there's the Community Greenhouse Gas Plan, there's the Sustainable Development Strategy, there's actions to reduce Calgary's ecological footprint, and work with Calgary Economic Development in the development of an environmental business strategy. At the provincial level, as the Mayor mentioned, we're working with Alberta Environment to work on a climate change strategy support. There's also other cities here, Edmonton and Medicine Hat. They'll be taking away information from here as well as providing some expertise into today. Internationally, as the Mayor mentioned, there's the World Energy Cities event, which is here during the first week of October. And Wednesday we'll announce what the components of the Calgary Accord is, the official signings on Thursday.
People all over the world are coming together to recognize that our cumulative impacts are being felt on a global scale and that only concerted, consistent action on that same scale is required to meet it. Actions made at the community level is where the real progress on greenhouse gas emission reduction will be made. Provinces and countries must provide supportive policies and frameworks, but each community is unique. And in order to respond to local community needs and opportunities within a global context, we have to think together. Charting Calgary's low-carbon future will be built by community stakeholders just like you. And they'll also play a critical role in ensuring how it rolls out in terms of its success.
Ultimately, what emerges from today will be a community roadmap. It'll be something that everybody can feed into, not just the City of Calgary, and hopefully it'll be something that we can all see ourselves in and find some support for charting what we do in terms of trying to address the challenges of a low-carbon future in the future. It's about managing risk. As usual, we can compromise some of the challenges that we've got going forward if we're not careful with the decisions that we make. We can't afford to not think about these things. The same entrepreneurial maverick spirit that got us to where we are as a city right now is the things that we're going to need going forward, particularly to help deal with some of the challenges that we face continuing to demonstrate leadership, not just locally, but provincially and internationally on some environmental issues.
Today we have professional facilitation services from Alberta Culture and Community Spirit. And we'd like to thank all of them that are here. There's about 12 of them that have come from all points of the province to help us here today. One of the unique features that we've incorporated for today is a theme weaver process. And for that, we brought Skid Crease.
The process of theme weaving is rather unique because there's no prepared keynote. So my job today is to actually interfere and drop into and immerse myself in all of your discussions going on here this morning. So my job is to pull your group brain ideas together. I do not have a prepared concluding keynote. You will feed it to me with the power of your ideas as the day progresses. And I will give you back exactly what you deserve. Nothing but the best. Here we go. That's it.
Rob McIntosh is a co-founding member of the Pembina Institute.
I've been in the change business for about 32 years now, and consistently over that period of time, it's been clear that the rubber really hits the road, the action really happens at the municipal government and community level. We encourage and we support and we hope for leadership from provincial and federal governments. But on this particular file, on the environmental file in general, and on the climate change file, it was the 1988 Toronto Atmosphere Conference in heavy involvement from municipalities that really brought the science of climate change into the public and business arena. And ever since 1988, it has been constant and consistent leadership, municipal government sector in Canada that has shown fastest and most efficiently the delivery of real concrete results and action. So it's no surprise, but it's again encouraging to see the City of Calgary, among other municipalities, stepping up to the plate to show this level of leadership. We need to be containing the average warming globally to 2 degrees Celsius in order to avoid catastrophic climate change. So everything works backwards from there. That means containing the increase in greenhouse gas concentrations in the atmosphere to, at best, a 550 part per million level. That's a doubling from pre-industrial levels. That means we have to stop the growth in greenhouse gas emissions by 220 at the latest. And it means we've got to eventually reduce our emissions by at least 80% of our 1990 levels by 2050. So what does that mean for us? What that means for us is we are moving very, very quickly towards a 90 to 95% reduction in our per capita emissions. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not tinkering at the edges. To eliminate 95% of our per capita emissions, our industrial share, our municipal share, our personal lifestyle share, we are talking major, significant, big change. So what does that look like in Canada? Well, if you spread our emissions out, that's just a basic bar chart. Most of our emissions are still in heavy industry, although we draw on that heavy industry for our electricity needs, for our fossil fuel transportation needs, and for those other industrial facilities, the left-hand side. The little blue bar in the middle of the right-hand side, that's our individual emissions from transportation. The little dark blue bar beside it that's our individual emissions from residential buildings. So we all have a job to do here, but a big part of this is going to have to come in Canada from our heavy industry emissions and our share of that, including our share from electricity, including our share from the economic benefits we get from the energy industry and other industries. We also have in a low-carbon future some economic prosperity goals that are absolutely critical. We have to have in this province, in this city, a viable and hopefully a leading industry. An energy industry that will continue to provide jobs, that will continue to provide tax revenue and maybe royalty revenue from the supply of energy. But those are going to have to be low-carbon energy sources. But as well from the supply of energy services and energy demand management technologies. So that's the economic need side we have. The other key economic prosperity goal affects our cost of living and our competitiveness. We have to have an affordable cost of living for us as individuals, and we have to have a competitive operating climate for our businesses. And that means our cost of food, our cost of energy, our cost of all those services, and our available lifestyle options have to be low carbon because it's going to cost a lot to emit carbon. Let's talk a bit now, as Jeff and Carrie asked me to, about innovation. Well, innovation requires motivation. What are the key motivation driving forces that are going to get us seriously innovating at the level we're talking about? First of all, we have the environmental issues picture. We have a lot of environmental issues out there, but without a doubt, the big one on the radar screen now that interacts with and accelerates all of the environmental issues and eclipses those other environmental issues is climate change. We're not talking climate change anymore. The language has changed because the science is real. We're talking catastrophic climate change. Coming out of the March 12, 2009 Scientific Congress, basically summarized, recent observations confirm, given the high rates of observed emissions, the worst case IPCC scenarios, trajectories, or even worse, are now being realized. And they go on to say there is a significant risk that many of these trends will accelerate, leading to an increasing risk of abrupt or irreversible climatic shifts. The problem that has not been in the models that is making this very, very serious now is a concept called runaway climate change or accelerating climate change. And it's based on a series of positive feedback loops that the models don't do a very good job, and that's why we're under-predicting the rate of climate change and the seriousness of climate change. And there's a list, you can see them there. It's everything from the rapid melting of the Arctic ice that removes albedo to the release of methane as our permafrost melts down, which causes more gas to go up, to what is probably the big kicker, and that's ocean acidification and the inability of the ocean to continue to absorb the CO2 that it used to be able to absorb. So that's motivation. Here's another motivation piece for me. The consensus from the global environmental and more global scientific community is that in the ranking of OECD member countries and how they are being assessed on their climate action performance by the non-profit organizations, the unaligned, the scientific, the agencies. In 2007, Canada was third last in its global reputation for action on climate change. And the only folks falling behind Canada were Australia and the USA. Since 2007, Australia has made a rapid reversal of its position and is moving very, very aggressively on real hard action on the ground. And the United States, as a result of the new president and the new administration, has also taken a much stronger leadership role. Folks, we're running dead last. Dead last is not a great place to be as a country, and dead last is a lousy place to be in an economy where you're going to be penalized for running last. So that's a little bit of motivation to get our act together and get moving. Another key motivation area is the economic opportunity or risk equation. The low carbon energy, clean tech, green tech revolution is underway, and it's coming at us like a freight train. We have incredible leadership measured by dollars invested, walking the talk, action on the ground, programs that are moving, measurement of reduced emissions from the European community. Under the new U.S. leadership, we saw $85 billion in the last stimulus package directly invested, moved into renewable energy and energy efficiency. Compared to Canada's stimulus investment to get us out of this deficit mess, on a per capita basis, the U.S. is outspending us 8 to 12 to 1, between 8 and 12 to 1 per capita. That money, coupled with the investment by the American corporations, U.S. private sector, moving into clean technology, green energy, is estimated to be as much as 15 to 1 on a per capita basis. When you spend money, when you motivate the Americans to do what they do well, they move really fast and they get the job done. Why is the U.S. moving this way? It's worth taking a minute to reflect on that. In part, they're doing it because science has regained a legitimate role in U.S. policymaking. That's good. But more importantly, it's happening in the United States because clean energy, green technology is now seen as the only way the Americans can do what they did better than they did it when they had the race for the moon. And that is drive their industry, drive their industrial innovative capacity to create something new that they can win at, that they can be good at, that they can lead economically at again. Because they're not going to do it on manufacturing, they're not going to do it competing against the Chinese and the Indians and folks like that on some of those traditional areas. It's also being done because the Americans have to stop the hemorrhaging of money out of the country to manage their balance of trade accounts and their deficits, and they want to stop funding petro-dictators who are underwriting terrorism. The Pentagon is a very strong supporter of this policy. And there's an emerging self-interested lobby in the United States that has come together. It's a marriage of the religious right that is now accepting green stewardship with the new economy winners in electricity and batteries in New Tech, California, with the traditional environmental community, with the portion of the oil and gas industry that knows it can win in a race to low-carbon fossil fuels. Another motivation is international compliance. When we get talking about Kyoto, Copenhagen, all of those United Nations framework rules, we are doing one thing and one thing only. We are recognizing that the biggest limited resource we have in the world today is space in the atmosphere to assimilate and cycle carbon. Those conversations are about divvying up and dividing and allocating a scarce resource, space in the atmosphere for carbon. When you allocate that, you allocate each country a share. And that's basically what Kyoto did, that's what the Copenhagen Agreement will do. It will allocate a share of that global resource to Canada. In turn, Canada has to allocate shares of that available resource, that limited resource, to sectors of the economy, to cities, to provinces somehow. And that's what the whole game is about. What will it cost to do this? The estimates, the best estimates coming out of the international economic community that are advising global leaders is that we can get the job done for well less than a 1% reduction in the growth rate of the economy. The recent IPCC work that has been done has indicated that to achieve stabilization levels, we're going to probably be able to reduce the rate of growth in the economy by something in the 0.12% annual growth rate. It may cost net, but it's not going to cost a tenth of the reduction in global economic activity we've witnessed in the last year. There are 6 key things that we have to be doing, and now we're getting into your roadmap and your action on the ground in your communities and your private sector work and your government work. Number 1, we must achieve major gains in energy efficiency. Number 2, we must achieve big reductions in end-use demand for energy, and those are not the same thing. If we decide we need light today, we can deliver it with a very inefficient incandescent bulb, or we can produce it with a highly efficient LCD or compact fluorescent bulb. But do we need light at all? Can we put, as this wonderful facility has done, put natural windows and light in so we don't need electric lighting in the building? Then we have reduced the demand. If you drive an efficient vehicle or take public transit to work, you're using a more efficient technology. If you telecommute and work from home and don't need that energy at all, you reduce the demand for transporting yourself to work, you have reduced the end-use demand. 2 key strategies. Number 3, we need to achieve deep reductions in the carbon intensity of the remaining fossil fuel production and consumption. I have a beef with many of my environmental colleagues. Some of them are hung up on the idea that fossil fuels can't be part of a low-carbon future. And I say that's just ideology. Fossil fuels can be managed in a way that their carbon intensity can be dramatically lowered, and that allows them to be a part of a low-carbon future if we're smart about how we do it and if we set the goals and invest the resources. Whether fossil fuels are low carbon or high carbon purely depends on the technology innovation we throw at them. There is absolutely a significant role in the future, in my opinion. Number 4, it must though involve rapid penetration of renewable, low carbon energy sources. This is not a choice between renewables and fossils. This is getting the most out of both of those components. Number 5, it requires the protection and enhancement of the carbon sinks that will absorb carbon out of the atmosphere and store it. Whether they are geological sinks or whether they are biomass sinks in soil or in trees, doesn't matter. The bottom line is, if it gets it out and holds it and stores it for a long period of time, it's a big part of the solution. And number 6, we have to diversify our economic development strategies so we're not just in the energy game, so we're also pursuing low-carbon products and services. All these components have to succeed big time, big way, in order to achieve that 95% range of reductions. So we got to stop wasting time saying one strategy is better than the other, one component isn't valuable, all 6 components are required. What are the conditions for success in innovation? Innovation, number 1, requires serious investment by both the public sector and the private sector. Now, if your governments are spending less than 1/10 or 1/12 of what your other OECD partner competitors are doing in the global economy, you're not going to be a leader. You can try hard, you can do your best, but good Lord, folks, we have to get a serious investment in R&D. We're at the bottom of the pack by almost everybody's measure. The energy industry itself doesn't have a great track record here either. In a country that has some of the lowest levels of our R&D investment, the Canadian energy industry has one of the lowest levels of any sector for reinvestment into R&D leading towards these sorts of things. There's a little bit there, but relative to the resources available, there has to be a big step up. Innovation also requires not just cash, but your best human resources. So I have a real simple test when I go in and work with a company or a city. Where is your innovation team? Who is directly responsible for innovation? Who's accountable? Where are your VPs of innovation? Show me where your best and brightest people are, and what else do they have on their radar screen in their job chart? And I can tell you in 10 minutes whether that company is serious about innovation and R&D or whether they're not by the quality of the people and their assignments and how much other clutter they have on their table. until our energy industries put a serious component of their best people with enough time to chase innovation, they're not going to be leading in this field. And yet they have the best and the brightest right here in our province, in our energy industry. Are they going to continue to chase growth in capacity, or are we going to start chasing growth in quality and innovation? It's a choice, and we're so well positioned to do well at it if we choose correctly. Innovation requires an appetite for risk. You have to be prepared to make mistakes. You have to accept, as a venture capitalist does, as an entrepreneur does, I'm going to try 5 things. 3 of them are going to bust and fall down. 2 of them are going to do reasonably well. Of those 2, I'm going to try even harder. 1 of them is going to hit the home run, and that's where I'm going to get results. And I'm not going to be penalized for the 3 that fail or the 1 that has moderate results. If you don't try stuff, if you don't allow for failure, if you don't encourage taking risks, you will not get innovation. I know of what I speak because I've been spending the last 3 years hammering against the walls of folks who say they want change with some very promising innovative results, only to find that these barriers are much more significant than I had expected. Innovation requires the opportunity to have a rapid exchange of ideas, and I stress the word rapid. It's not good enough to talk back and forth or get information to somebody else once every 3 to 6 months. You need to be in a climate where the top ideas are percolating around and are incubated and supported rapidly. Innovation requires good antenna, staying plugged in so you know what else other people are up to. Innovation also requires a little bit of incentive, regulatory motivation. Everywhere on the clean environment file, the air issues file, the water file, the climate change file that we have seen results, it's where we have put a strong regulatory requirement. We cap levels of emissions. You can't operate unless you operate within these limits. We have intensity standards, we have efficiency standards. So it requires a regulatory driver. It also requires financial motivation. If you're serious about innovation, you need to ensure that you have some real, hard, fair financial motivation. And that financial motivation can include penalties and incentives. First and foremost, though, on the climate file and the low carbon file, financial motivation requires putting a real price on carbon. Innovation also helps if you identify and remove some of the barriers. Let me tell you about a few of the barriers that I have been astounded by in the last 5-6 years I've been working really seriously, mostly in the private sector now, on driving innovation. First of all, the financial incentives to grow big far outweigh the financial incentives to grow better. That is absolutely key to understand. Whether it's a big oil sands company that is rewarded for adding more capacity but continuing to run lousy, inefficient operations, or whether it's a city that is putting a planning program together and rewards developers for slapping large amounts of footprint down away from the center of the city and makes it difficult and expensive in terms of bottom line financial impacts on the developer to infill and do things better and more intensively in the center. Most cities still suffer from that perverse incentive. We also have a big barrier. We have an economic and a cultural fixation on quantitative growth as the raison d'etre for economic development, rather than qualitative improvement. And in the issue of carbon, we can't keep getting bigger. There is a cultural resistance to change in many of our large energy players and also in many of our big government players. We've got to overcome that cultural resistance to grab the basic boilerplate engineering that worked for the last 10 years, pull it off, stick it into the plan, because we know it works, it's worked for the last 10 years, and run with it. We have an incredible amount of ego and attitude inside some of the folks who have to make decisions to do something new. They've been doing it their way. They are the people who have been working on a big idea and they've got billions invested in moving it forward. And for a little company, a little entrepreneur with a new idea to come and get acceptance and a level playing field to try something new inside the big decision maker players is very, very difficult. So the big energy players, the big government players really need to understand how big a barrier that is and remove that cultural resistance and push the ego and attitude to the side to give the entrepreneurial ideas an opportunity to play. They're just going to go elsewhere to where there's more receptivity if you don't. And we also have the issue of administrative and bureaucratic suffocation, the amount of time and effort and energy that it takes to move good ideas forward. So those are real barriers. If you don't plan to remove them, you won't succeed. If you do plan to remove them, you can lead in the innovation game, but you need to be very, very honest about why good ideas are not going anywhere and address them and get them out of the way. As you start to chart your action plans, your strategies for innovating in your community, in your city, in your sphere of influence, number one, get the price signals right. If we don't get the price of carbon into the decision-making equations everywhere consistently, we won't make very good decisions. Economic price still drives most decisions. So if you want to drive low-carbon future, price carbon properly into your decision-making process. Require innovation, don't hope for it. If you don't require innovation from your industry leaders, from your government leaders, from your policy expectations, from your politicians, if they don't require it of the players they influence, you won't get it. And get serious. As I said, the race is on. We're falling behind. However, this city, this province is so well equipped to win in this race if we simply think big and if we get rid of some of these barriers. Take advantage of the municipal leadership, take advantage of the community leadership, take advantage of the small-scale capacity where people talk in the hallways, where people make decisions quickly. At the municipal level, a good idea can get from the community to a councillor or a mayor to the civil servants and back out very, very fast. That's a big advantage you have to move things at this level. And measure and report the right stuff. If we're saying we want a low-carbon future, but we continue to report back to the public on our performance on the basis of a bunch of other measures, then we're not really linking our reward, our reporting story, our performance accountability to the right stuff. So measure the right stuff and report the right stuff. And finally, commit and don't quit till it happens. Thank you. I hope you have a really productive next couple of hours and rest of the day. And I just want to close by again stressing how incredibly thankful I am and how lucky we are to have the municipal leadership that we're seeing coming out of municipalities in Canada on this file, and in particular the City of Calgary has been one of those leaders, so good job, folks.
We're going to take a 10-minute break here right now, and during that time, if there are any media people who want to interview any of the keynote folks, we're just going to be outside that curtain on the other side.
In Canada, and the second largest in North America, and we intend to keep doing that. And so we, as a city, as a municipality, are on target. But it's not just about the city. It's about our community. It's about each and every individual taking a piece of action, whether that be a business community, whether that be your individual as a homeowner. And so the targets are right, the targets are set. The City of Calgary is leading the way as one of 15 member municipalities of the World Energy Cities Partnership, which will be in Calgary for its annual meeting in October. And so, are we on track? Yes, we are. Do we need other support? Yes, we will.
Rob talked a little bit about cultural resistance. When you're going forward with things like Imagine Calgary and Planet, how does the city try and get citizens to buy into some of these pretty aggressive plans while having to sacrifice or let go of old attitudes and maybe give up things that we don't always want to give up?
Well, I think by and large you're starting to see a significant change occurring. If you think about the development industry as an example, green built programs, going green with new buildings in the downtown core, leading the way through leadership through environmental design. All of those are leaderships that are not only focused through city operations, but also through the private sector. And so we're seeing more and more of that. It is a significant change, maybe not as rapid as we'd like to see, but nonetheless, the business community and individuals are moving forward, and I think on the right track.
Rob McIntosh also talked about putting a price on carbon. Does the city have any plans for that?
Well, the province, of course, has a price on carbon at $15 a ton and suggested to move up to $30 a ton. I can say to Calgarians that we are well aware of the price of carbon, and we are moving forward to eliminate having to pay those carbon charges. The city, of course, is a large user of electricity and carbon just by moving water that we use every day, taking it from the Bow River, pumping it through those lift stations, putting it into your home, pumping it back out and treating it through the three waste treatment facilities that we operate. All of that uses a lot of energy, uses a lot of carbon. We are reducing our footprint. Our goal is set, and we are on the right track.
How does today help get us on the right track? What do you hope to come out of today with?
I think the importance of today, if you look at it, it's a discussion and a conversation with the Calgary community, the business community, academia, researchers, people on both sides of the argument. We're moving too fast, we're not moving fast enough. A debate is a healthy thing. Today's low carbon footprint summit is really a continuation of a discussion that occurred a year and a half ago. This is the 5th or 6th roundtable discussion. I think it's interesting today that our lead corporate sponsor, of course, is an energy company, that they are committed, as is SAIT as an institution, to dealing with the challenge that we have of reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. And so I think it's important to continue the conversation, to move forward with action plans, to have deliverables, have measurables, and have a public debate.
Certainly the innovators here are well connected into what's happening stateside. Many of the companies that are big energy players here are well aware, because their parent companies, their colleagues stateside, are some of the folks doing leadership work in this area. Politically, we are not very well connected in terms of understanding how and why the United States is moving very fast. And what's key to understand is leadership in the United States is coming often at the state level, or even at the municipal level or utility level, as well as the huge entrepreneurial community. It's the federal government that moves last. And what shifted when the Obama administration came in was that even the federal government in the states had taken on a position that they have to move rapidly to reduce carbon emissions, but they have to do it in a way that is going to bring big economic advantage to the United States, and that's the design behind their entire clean technology, green energy revolution. And it will be a revolution that eclipses what's going on in anything in the space race or the Cold War period or anything like that. And that's being driven by economic necessity, not just by environmental reality.
So on a federal level, the OEDC, Canada is not doing very well, but how would you rate how we're doing here in Calgary?
Well, the Alberta government has not yet fully understood at the government level the importance of a both-and strategy to rapidly driving down the greenhouse gas intensity, reducing the carbon footprint of our energy industry so that our fossil fuel players can continue to do well here, and at the same time motivating and incenting and supporting the emerging renewable energy industry, so and the energy efficiency industry.
I learned a lot about the environment, and my knowledge and awareness about what we can do together rapidly increased, so that's how I became interested.
So give us ideas. You've been researching environment, what we can achieve better. What can we do? Have ideas?
Yes. Well, in my speech, I mentioned that if everyone does commit to doing one simple act, we can make a big difference. I just try to raise awareness and tell others about what they can do and how they can help our environment.
Tell me what's an environmental friendly birthday party. What does that imply?
Well, to start, I had it at a park near my house, and being near to my house, it meant less driving to get there. And I also had various initiatives that I added in, like I had no balloons because they don't biodegrade, and I did lots of research through books and through the internet to and I eventually discovered plates that were made of bamboo and they biodegrade in your composter, and cups that look like plastic but were actually made from corn. So that's like some of the stuff we used, and we also planned games like scavenger hunts and other things that would really allow the rest of the kids and the other guests to really become connected with nature and appreciate why they need to take care of it.
Can you just elaborate and explain a little bit about where you stand on where fossil fuels?
It's just plain reality. We cannot implement renewable energy fast enough, and we cannot implement energy efficiency fast enough to completely stop using fossil fuels tomorrow. Nor do we necessarily want to if it's going to be super expensive. Instead, what we can do is we can say we have to reduce the reliance on fossil fuels. We have to give renewable energy and energy efficiency the same opportunity to grow now as we originally gave fossil fuels. That means we have to put some public investment into them, some incentives and some support. We have to remove the barriers. We have to accelerate that development. But even if we do that at a rapid pace, we're going to continue to have fossil fuels around for a long time. Instead of being ideological about it, what I believe we can do is we can simply say, what's the performance standard? What's the bar? And if you can deliver a megawatt hour of electricity, or if you can move a passenger a kilometer in transportation with a small amount of carbon associated with that, I don't care whether it comes from fossil fuels or renewable energy or demand reduction through energy efficiency. We can't be dogmatic about fossil fuels being bad, but what we have to do is force fossil fuels to perform better with much, much lower levels of carbon. And that means we're going to have to spend real money and put real regulations in place to drive down the carbon footprint, the greenhouse gas intensity of fossil fuels. And it's easy to do. It's actually fairly easy to do. Most of the initiatives have positive return on investment.
Now the cards that you see that are generated came from our roundtables that we had in May. We had conversations with 5 different groups of people, and some of their thoughts were put up on those cards. But we want and know that there might be some other things that are going on, and we want to make sure we capture those. So if you have another idea, we want to capture those at the end of the 40 minutes. Now, what we're looking for ideas are rather important. And as Rob has kind of prompted us a little bit, he really set the stage very well. I want big picture ideas. We want you to think big about these. We want to be innovative about what we're talking about. And what we'd like to do is create actions that are broad in concepts. You'll notice that some of the cards that are up may be very, very specific. It may be exactly about making sure the bike paths are clear in the winter time so that we can bike to work. That's a very specific action, and that's great. But is there a broader concept or something bigger that we could make happen so that all of those actions could come underneath that, so that we could all get to work easily? Or maybe we don't have to go to work, right? As he said, maybe we can telecommute instead. If you would like to move to a different table, now is the time. Get up and vote with your feet. Have a great conversation. And you get a chance to take a dot and place it on the card that you think is fundamentally important to the future of having a low carbon future in Calgary. But you only get 3 dots, and you got to be strategic about where you want to put them and what's important.
It's a thrill to be here today. I can feel the positive energy already. I also have to acknowledge the kind remarks of Carrie in introducing me. I was at an internal meeting where, of course, we're doing a lot of introductions of people in the new merged company to one another. And I was introduced as Gord Lambert, and the line was, Gord has issues. And I didn't know quite how to take that. I do have a lot of issues, though, and of course the energy industry and the oil and gas companies, we have issues of navigating change. The premise of my remarks today, though, is in the face of daunting challenges, And of course, my colleague Rob, I think, painted the picture of the nature of those challenges in front of us. It's the importance of positive vision in how we tackle those. And I would premise that positive vision always trumps negative vision in how to generate creative energy. And a couple of quick examples just to start off of that would be to reflect on Martin Luther King and his famous "I Have a Dream" speech. And that speech was on a difficult challenge of racism in America. And his speech did have an impact in driving societal change, but it was because he painted a picture of what the future would be in America if racism was tackled in a positive manner. He could have easily defaulted to a rant or to a negative vision about all the injustice that was at play, but he rose above that and painted that positive picture, and that engages creative energy. And imagine if, for those of you in the business community, to make a more real example for you, imagine you worked for an organization, business organization, whose vision was avoidance of bankruptcy. Would that really be what gets you up in the morning and has you bring your best energies to bear? It's critical that business be successful, be sustainable, but avoidance of bankruptcy wouldn't do it. Negative vision characterizes much dialogue that's at play on environmental issues. I mean, a real tendency to want to look for good guys, bad guys, paint that picture. But adversarial engagement and negative vision creates gridlock and polarized behavior and does not move the ball forward. What I want to do in my short time today is equip you, though, with some additional tools that can help frame your views of how you drive change. And every single person here today is from different backgrounds, but I fully agree with Rob that we're all in the change business. So we have to have a set of skills that help us be effective in doing that. And the Brundtland Commission articulation of sustainable development has been interpreted in many different ways over time. But fundamental to that premise is that a strong economy, a healthy environment, and social well-being are interdependent. You can't have one without the other. And as an example of that, look at environmental issues in the developing world. We've just had the Olympics in China where they had major air quality issues at play. Those environmental issues are often economic issues. There's social issues and choices that have been made about how we transport ourselves, how we plan communities. And that interdependency of the economy, environment, and social well-being can be a source of creative thinking. In other words, environmental issues, some of those solutions can be in the social realm, whether it's governance, and a lot of the ideas you see here now are playing out that way. But each of us has to think in all three dimensions on these problems, because the problems in front of us now, like climate change, don't honor boundaries in the way that traditional problems have. If you looked at acid rain, we were able to put scrubbers on the end of stacks and take on that problem in a fairly straightforward manner. The issue of climate change is much more fundamental. It's how we produce and use energy. And we have to transform our energy system over time. And that requires new frames of reference, more systemic thinking, and sustainable development as a frame of reference then becomes very powerful to that. This is a model for how we size or frame our reference point as Suncor on our climate change strategy. It's meant to just provide you with a sense of where we can intervene as an organization to affect change. It encompasses many of the areas that you're tackling here today, from the end use side of energy through to the production, but a heavy technology orientation as well. And how we develop and deploy new technology and innovate is at the heart of this challenge. So again, to Rob's point, having the enabling conditions for innovation is absolutely critical. This is actually a model for change that Peter Senge had really articulated in his book, The Dance of Change. And it's a simple premise. On the one hand, you have the current state, and you have to define and be clear of what that current state circumstance is, which means getting the facts on the table. So on climate change, as we reflect on the state of emissions in Canada, where they come from, a lot of Rob's analytical discussion, but you don't want to get hung up there. You want to quickly move to a dialogue of what's the desired future state that you want to create. It engages creative tension by definition. It also forces bolder thinking because you don't think about incremental change from current state as your frame of reference. You suspend judgment of the current state to think about what is possible. Painting the picture of that future that you want to create, you're engaging creative tension in stretching that rubber band that does want to resolve itself. So people will start to want to move from current state to that future state once they have clarity of what that looks like. President Obama, I think, implicitly uses this model in a very clear way. You know, that we've had daunting challenges on the economy, on many social issues in the U.S., on health care. The language he uses in his Audacity of Hope is very much painting that picture of the future that he wants to create for the country, and you see the movement that starts to happen as a result of that. We did work with Rob McIntosh in 2001 in our entry into the wind energy business. So we're actually a large wind producer now. We have 4 wind farms across the country. The bold vision we painted at that time of the desired future state was that we were going to declare publicly an intent to invest $100 million over 5 years to enter the wind business. We're now at $240 million having been invested. So the $100 million seemed very it was a lot of creative tension to get our board of directors to commit to $100 million at that point in time for that business. We're now at $240 million. In 1997, just after the Kyoto Conference of the Parties, we did a cross-border emissions trade with a U.S. company, Niagara Mohawk Power, facilitated by an environment NGO in the U.S., Environmental Defense. And it was 10 megatons, a huge size of emissions trade. Of course, hindsight being what it is, way ahead of its time. I mean, we're starting to talk today about harmonization of an emissions market. We did that trade knowing that that would happen, but with the expectation it would happen much quicker than it did. So in the future, looking ahead, municipalities are where creativity and innovation are unfolding on climate change, on energy. Tap into creative energy anywhere you can find it. Look for passion. So everyone with an idea who's got passion for that idea, you should be going for it. And then we collectively as companies, as governments, should be enabling it. Leverage the work of others. This isn't a journey that we need to take alone as Calgary. The City of London in UK is one of the examples of great things going on. Unusual partnerships can generate huge value and creativity, which is why we do work with the environment community in many ways. And then that common vision of success. The clearer you can be again on what future you want to create and what that outcome is you want to achieve, the more chance you have of achieving it. So thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really excited to be here today representing the youth of our city. And I'm even more excited that the organizers of this event thought that getting the perspective of an 11-year-old girl was important. Oh, and missing school isn't that bad either. Actually, I really like school. And it was there last year that I had the opportunity to do a number of research projects on environmental issues. I studied the effects of global warming on emperor penguins, oil spills on mallard ducks, and river pollution on beluga whales. I learned about eating locally and how that affects our environment. Through these projects, my knowledge and awareness about what we are doing to our environment and how we, together, can preserve and protect our planet grew to a point that I knew I me to a coincidental encounter with an organization called One Simple Act. One Simple Act was created by the government of our province to encourage Albertans to pledge to commit to one simple act that they can do to help save our environment. They can be easy things, like making one less car trip per week, or changing your light bulbs to CFLs when your old ones burn out. But if everyone in the province participated, that would be 3.5 million simple acts towards a better planet and a better future. I was already planning my 11th birthday party, and I knew that I wanted it to be eco-friendly. So I decided to take it a step further and commit to hosting a completely environmentally friendly birthday party. I wanted a location that was outdoors so that the kids could really connect with nature and appreciate why we need to take care of it. I decided on Sandy Beach Park, which is near my house, so that meant less driving to get there. My mom and I organized a scavenger hunt that had my guests running all over the park to find things that were natural to the area. Instead of balloons, which do not biodegrade, I made my decorations out of recycled paper and scraps of fabric. After doing some research on the internet, I discovered disposable plates made of bamboo and drinking cups that looked like plastic but were actually made from corn. Both of these products can go right into your composter after they're used. All the food that we ate came from local producers. Hot dogs from a meat plant in Canmore, potato chips from Tabor, and fruits and veggies from our local farmers market, completely pesticide-free. Instead of gifts, I asked my friends to please bring a donation to the Alberta Eco Trust Foundation. But the best part about the whole party was that my friends left with a renewed sense of commitment to helping the environment. One boy in particular had arrived at the party not very keen about the whole eco-friendly theme. He had exclaimed, "Not all that environmental stuff." But by the time he left, he was volunteering to take the bamboo plates and corn cups home to his composter. And a few weeks after my party, I received an email from another friend who was there, asking if it was okay to have a party like mine because it was so much fun. My one simple act inspired a few other simple acts, and hopefully those simple acts inspired even more. I could stand here for hours and talk to you about my hopes and dreams for Calgary's environmental future. Ideas I have, innovations I'd like to see implemented, maybe even a career in the environmental field. But Jeff said 5 or 10 minutes, so that will have to wait for another time. With a city of over 1 million people, charting Calgary's low-carbon future can indeed be a task that seems just too big and complicated. We know the solutions must be large to have an impact, so we sit back and wait for someone else to come up with the big solution. But what if we all started with just one simple act? One small thing that you can do to help the environment. It may seem like something small, but many small things can add up to something pretty big. By doing so, you will be ensuring a healthy future for our environment, for your children and grandchildren, and quite possibly for yourself. Thank you for listening to me today. You're a wonderful audience. I especially especially want to thank Jeff Reading and Carrie Booth for giving me this opportunity to participate, and my teachers back at Alboya School for giving me the day off to come. My friends and I raised $300 to donate to the Alberta Eco Trust Foundation. I would now like to present this donation to my friend, Pat Letizia, Executive Director of the Alberta Eco Trust Foundation. Pat, may you please come to the stage.
Sophie Berry is an inspiration to me. In her youthful wisdom, she understands that the environment is life. It's the air we breathe, the water we drink, the land we live on, the energy we use, the things we buy, and the waste we produce. Not only does Sophie get this and take personal action to deal with it, she inspires those around her to take action, even as she said, one simple act at a time. I'm very honored that Sophie chose Alberta Eco Trust as the recipient of her generosity. She knows that her gift will be shared among many others to reach a number of organizations that share her concern for the environment. This generosity of spirit and level of stewardship in one so young is a testament to her parents, her teachers, and her own character. So thank you very much, Sophie. A community-based strategy is critical to a low-carbon future. Each and every person consumes energy, so the key to any long-term strategy is getting as many citizens as possible involved in energy reduction. This summit is a good start to getting Calgarians from all sectors on the same page. We need to find an effective and equitable way to get people participating in the planning and execution of a community energy plan. This way, citizens become more aware of problems related to energy use and active in finding alternatives in energy production. If the community is on board and a key part of the future strategy, then changes in political priorities will never derail the outcome. It will be owned and honored by the community. Whether it's our community here today, a community of 5 people in a small office, the thousands of employees in the city of Calgary or in a company like Suncor, a faith community, a school community, or the 1 and a bit million people in Calgary, we all are part of a community. So what's the magic bullet to getting a community engaged? It's a good question, and the answer is there is no magic bullet. So before we talk about community strategies for a low carbon future, I'd like to just to provide a little context for how I see the community involved. I work for Alberta Eco Trust, which is one of the very few funders of environmental initiatives in Alberta. We are incorporated as a unique partnership between industry and environmental NGOs. We raise money annually, like the United Way does for social issues or the Calgary Foundation does for its 360-degree programming. We provide grants with those dollars of up to $30,000 for community-based environmental initiatives around the province. Climate change and air quality projects are one of our funding priorities. This includes large, sophisticated and provincially focused projects like the Pembina Institute's Green the Grid project, or the Good Life Bike Shop, which is a small entrepreneurial youth-led initiative that promotes, encourages and demonstrates the use of bicycles as an alternative means to car travel. Something that I think we're going to see more and more as the generation shifts in Alberta, and the young people that are coming up see the value of living without driving. By virtue of its very structure, Alberta Eco Trust creates a community, a safe place for people of many different perspectives, mostly the roots and the suits, to come together and talk about local, regional, or provincial solutions to environmental problems. First, in many cases, the nonprofit sector is or can be ahead of business and government in understanding the science, the trends, and the data that form part of the solution, and they have the mandate to address it, to promote it, and to protect the public interest. Second, community groups are much more resilient and nimble than business and government in most cases. They're smaller, they have less resources, so they have to be resilient and nimble. They can initiate projects quickly, they can respond immediately to both challenges and opportunities, and they can change direction to take advantage of opportunities much more ably. Community groups also have access to citizens that government and businesses and industry don't. And they already spend a significant amount of their time and their talents educating the public and trying to build social movement toward large-scale behavior change, which is really what we're talking about here today. And last, it's easy to think of nonprofit groups as a financial or economic vacuum, that money contributed into that sector just disappears. We need to remember that the voluntary sector, that is nonprofit and charitable groups, contributes significantly to the GDP of Canada and the GPI. There are over 6,000 groups in Calgary, which means significant employment, the provision of goods and services, and the purchase of goods and services. This money just doesn't disappear. It's part of any economic restructuring plan, I'd like to remind all of you, especially those of you perhaps from the provincial government. It's true that these groups rely on the philanthropy and generosity of others to exist, and thus they often struggle to maintain momentum and direct adequate resources to their work. However, their link to the public and their own investment into their communities makes them an important part of Calgary's overall energy strategy. The city does not have to educate 1 million people on energy efficiency. They have a plethora of community resources to collaborate with. They just have to set the standard and the community will run with it. But that space has to be there. That framework needs to be established. There's a real need for widespread community awareness of energy efficiencies and alternatives. Many, maybe even most people, don't think of energy issues, much less consider how better energy efficiency means a stronger economy. We need to get to the place where community awareness of energy alternatives is so commonplace that citizens routinely incorporate cost-effective efficiency methods into their everyday practice. It's not out there, it's right here. It's part of how we think and how we act every day. We need strong local leadership. Successful programs always have champions, whether they're individuals, organizations. These leaders need to educate, support, convince, organize, and fundraise to achieve this vision. Again and again, it's the interest and initiative of a few people who take on or a few organizations or a few entities who take on an active role and garner the support of their fellow citizens to make their communities better places to live and work. Something like Imagine Calgary that I was privileged to be part of, that was a very transformative experience for me and I think for the people who work there. And I believe that the City of Calgary has really embraced Imagine Calgary internally, but we've seen maybe some faltering in how that translates out into the broader community. And that's why we need somebody to champion our new way forward. We need somebody to take those ideas, to take the framework of the idea and manage it within the community. We need coordination and oversight in the long term. We know that individual actions are critical to success, but it will be essential to coordinate, fund, administer, and implement energy programs on an ongoing basis for years to come. Some combination of nonprofit, business, and government groups, utility companies, institutions. Maybe we should create a coalition. Maybe we should create a fund to support community participation in the long term. Should we create a new NGO or transform an existing one? Those are all things that we need to talk about. We need community and political support. Good ideas without community and political backing often go nowhere. Strong and enthusiastic support from elected officials, civic leaders, and the community at large plays a critical role in turning a good idea into lasting local change. Isn't climate change really a social and economic problem? Or aren't the poor and the disenfranchised those who will suffer the most? Who needs to participate in this community energy plan? Don't just think of environmental groups. Think of the social service and health agencies, community associations, schools and institutions. There isn't an organization in this city that should not be part of a low-carbon future. We need promotion of more than just energy savings, and that means creating messages that work, because deciding to jump is not the same thing as taking the plunge. And we need an objective in this strategy for the future that transforms the market. It's not enough to say, change your light bulbs, buy energy saver appliances. We need to improve the market penetration of all of those things, because very few people take those up. It's a small percentage of the population that are drawn to that. We need to make that very common. We need comprehensive system strategies, because the goals we set here today are complex and they're integrated. There's not one thing or one sector that needs to commit. We need good governance. We need to protect and enhance the economy. We need to consider the social needs of our community. And we need to consider our built environment, and we need to protect the ecosystems that we all thrive on. Good community programs help all citizens, not just the elite few that are well and highly employed or highly educated. We need to help those other folks see that improving energy use can be a community priority directly tied to their own local concerns and goals. It's not just something that activists and politicians care about. Winston Churchill once said that those who build the present in the image of the past will miss out entirely on the challenges of the future. When I worked on Calgary's 100-year vision, I was asked to start, actually by Monica Pullman, who's here today. She said, imagine yourself standing on the banks of the Bow River at Fort Calgary in 1900. Now imagine standing there then and looking ahead 100 years. Is this the world you would have imagined? Would we have imagined State Polytechnic and the solar decathlon? Would we have imagined a man on the moon? Space stations? Hummers? Now, if we all look ahead another 100 years, much of what we have here today that we think is so important will be gone. The future is almost unimaginable given the pace of technology and insidious need for continuous innovation. So let's not be constrained by what we know now. Let's commit to charting a low-carbon future owned and delivered by all members of Calgary's community.
This is the part of the program where I'm going to make you do some work. We're going to have 12 different rooms. Each one of them will have a facilitator, and each one of them will have a stack of action cards that we want you to work on around an implementation plan. Everybody more or less clear on what's going to happen? There will be people there to guide you and signs to go, but I would suggest now that you get up out of your chair and pick a room.
Whiteboard. So we've got about 2 hours to look at doing some detailed implementation planning, given the results we have from this morning. We then went and provided some dots, and everybody's dot voted on what they thought were going to be the primary, most impactful strategies, and that's the input for this afternoon's session. So in our legislation theme, we had approximately 40 cards on that wall, and I posted on the wall here items with more than 2 dots. So we have 10 cards available for us to work on, or 10 action themes for us to work on this afternoon. That work is templated here in summary. I've written out the 5 questions that we're asking you to complete.
John's driving to work one morning, and we lived in North York, and as you drive into North York from the suburbs into the big city, we hit the gridlocks, as you will, on all of your major arteries coming through Calgary. And he had a theory that all of the big tractor trailers wait in their sleeping beds until they hear single passenger cars hit the roads. So they could get to work a lot earlier, right? They could be driving all night if they wanted, but they wait for the game to begin. So the trailers are just set to see all those little cars zipping out of the neighborhoods, and then they gun their engines. So John came past one of these big sleeping beds, and all the tractor trailers are revving up their diesels, watching him come down the road. This guy starts to pull out a big tandem trailer, and John guns it past the entrance, cuts him off. Down under a little dip, comes up to a light. He's in his old clunker, big tractor trailer pulls up behind him. John hits the gas, and his car stalls. And he said he remained calm for a few moments, and he's looking in his rearview mirror, waits till the light turns green again, doesn't want to flood the car, gasses it up again, nothing. Light turns red, light turns green again. He tries it once more, and then he said he became aware of movement in his peripheral vision out of the side view mirror, and he looked over and he said, Skid, you'd have to imagine the biggest belt buckle you've ever seen in your life, with 2 snakes intertwined coming up this cross, and a rather large belly oozing out over this plaid shirt. He said, I took a deep breath, I was in a cold sweat, I rolled the window down about this far and looked out. He said the most florid pair of absolutely brilliantly flashing green eyes looked in at him, this bushy face with a livid red beard piled all around and curly hair. And he leaned in the window and he said, well now, was it a particular shade of green you might be waiting for? It was 1988. Stephen Lewis chaired the World Meteorological Association's conference in Toronto, Ontario, Atmospheric Conference. And the consensus conclusion from the scientists at that conference was, and I will quote you, 1988, the world is conducting an uncontrolled, unintended experiment upon the atmosphere of the Earth, the consequences of which will be second only to a global nuclear war. 1988. What was the shade of green we were waiting for? And since 1988, we've watched the reports from various meteorological societies and the IPCC pile up steadily, providing us with all the material, all the warning systems, all the ground material we needed to do something. And we waited. And we waited until it got really serious. And this year in Copenhagen, the Secretary General for the UN conference has said basically to us, this is it. Either come out of this conference with a solid game plan for global governance on climate change, or you've got to realize that the locomotive's out of the station. And anything you will do from now on will be to mitigate for the second half of the 21st century. Now that's a pretty sobering reason as to why we are here today. The whole purpose of this conference was envisioning Calgary's low-carbon future, reducing our ecological footprint. It's as simple as that. One goal. And why, when the question came up, why energy? As Jeff reminded us, 56% of our ecological footprint here in Calgary comes from our energy use. So let's focus on that one and see if we can get that one right first. As a municipality, do you have the leadership willing to take you forward in this vision? Well, I would say, having looked on Dave Broncarnier's website and having seen some of the Planet Calgary and Imagine Futures going on, that you have all the political will you need. You also have two aldermen here who are quite supportive of making sure that this vision moves forward in the city of Calgary. But I understand that some of the votes in council go 8-7 to make decisions happen. So you have 7 councillors that you might want to start influencing to make sure they're on board and paddling in the same direction. Because political will from the people and the voice of the people and the children who need to remind us how to speak for them is asking us now to remember 1988 was a long time ago. And we are moving very rapidly into a future we may not want. Reese demonstrated that here at our host body, and some of us questioned the venue at first, whether this was going to be too noisy with all these students moving around. But I had a friend say to me a long time ago, if you want to change the future, teach children to become environmental engineers. The people who design the machines that make the toys and design the electrical systems, if they can do that wisely and well, effectively, with that long-term future goal in mind, we will have one of the best developments of technology we have ever seen. But they need to keep these dreams that you enacted here today on the top of the agenda. Of all of the things that happened here this morning, for me, it was Rob McIntosh. If you ever need to sit down at a board meeting or at a council meeting and defend this vision, it's all on that address that Rob gave this morning. I think that was as complete a package as I've ever seen. You talked about energy efficiency, which I prefer to call energy effectiveness, and conservation. You talked about energy financing, how to raise awareness and sponsor research. You talked about sourcing, finding the suppliers, and you talked about the legislation. Now this is legislation at the municipal, provincial, and federal levels. But I think it was very clear today to all of us in the room that the biggest change agent right now to work on is the municipal level. Now some municipalities, as I was reminded, are charter cities, as London, England. They can almost act like little countries. In the city of Calgary, we are not a charter city, but we have a lot of power municipally in order to invoke these changes. And so I would suggest that to our concerned politicians who were here today, that we use that line in to say, how do we best make these changes happen at the municipal level? What are the political efficacy skills that we need to learn and we need to teach our children to help us make these changes happen and to hold our elected officials accountable for making those changes happen? And if you've got members that are not on board, you need to replace your council. Simple as that. There was a common theme that went across every table, and I don't know if you all picked up on it, but a beautiful young pregnant mother here snapped it into a nutshell for me. What are the things we need to do to make this happen? And I quote you, we need to care about ourselves and our community. Now there's the driving force. It comes right back to that. And the second I would lay on your laps is, we need to remember that this is home. We need to reestablish sense of place. This is my home, my planet, and I want you to take care of it. And I'm going to demonstrate through my own personal modeling, the very best I can, with the best of knowledge at the time that I can acquire, that I can do it too. But I care about this place. I also care about me, and I care about my neighbors. I had a very wise friend when I started teaching who said, if you want to change the way children see each other in their communities, teach them to become lifesavers. Teach them life-saving skills starting in grade 5. Teach them emergency rescue. And then they will start to see their fellow community members not as enemies. They'll start to see their fellow community members as people they can assist, as people they can take care of. What a change in philosophy that would be as we move our way out of our castles and begin to recognize that we are one community with one shared air, water, soil, and energy space on this planet. How will we get to success? One of the speakers this morning said this will be, and I've summarized it, it will be a vision driven by dialogue with respect. A dialogue with respect. We may not all come from the same camp, but I can respect your position. I'm going to be willing to listen, and I'd ask you to listen to mine. And that's what leads us to consensus. Compromise for me is a lose-lose situation. Consensus is when we sit down together and say, I understand what you're talking about now. I can see your point of view. Let's work out a game plan that we can live with here. And that's a win-win situation when you arrive at consensus. The flip side of that coin was that adversarial confrontation will only lead us to gridlock. So if I go in there with both fists up and you're the bad guy, we're not going to get anywhere in a hurry. We need to go into the discussion with this as our community, our children's future. Let's start working together on this right now. And those were the skills. Sophie reminded us when she spoke to us of the purity of youth and of the power of one simple act. Probably one of the most eloquent addresses of the day. And Pat reminded us when she came up here of the power of community. Non-profit organizations working in partnership with business and industry and government to create a very powerful circle of support. And then you all went upstairs and planned, dispersed to your various rooms, and I went around and I tried to summarize some of the key issues from you. There was what I called a carbon accounting process, somehow, a full cost accounting process that included pricing, measurement, and enforcement. Almost everywhere we went today, if you're going to have a baseline for moving forward on this low carbon future, what's our usage now? How do we price carbon? How do we enforce the rules? And then we have a guideline for helping us to decide whether we're getting to where we'd like to be. Talking about smart grids, I heard people talking about creating ecosystem communities. I heard you say, in so many words, we need to celebrate our success. And in another great little book that I read leading up to this conference, there were a lot of serious faces here this morning. There are a lot of serious faces here right now. Turn around and look at somebody across the table and smile at them and say, wow, this is going to be fun. We're going to make this the most exciting project this city's ever engaged in. I heard Stephen Lewis speak at the World Congress, 5th Annual Congress in Montreal this year. And he's very opinionated, some of you may know. Stephen was also, I found out that night, the chair of that 1988 conference in Toronto. And he said he has, on his conscience ever since, worried about the fact that he never continued to push the climate change agenda. He said he got into very important issues with social justice and women's and children's issues and atrocities in Africa and orphans and HIV, but he said he's realized that this is the driving issue of the 21st century. And then he stood up and said, you know, our government should be charged with criminal negligence for their failure to act appropriately on climate change. He said, I'm 72 years old, I can say whatever I want to say. Would you like the truth? 2,000 people from 150 countries went nuts. Yes! Tell us the truth, for God's sakes! And Stephen gave them a little bit of a liturgy on what's coming down the tubes if we do not act. He said it's fine for us as educators and community members to continue the wonderful work we're doing on small-scale environmental initiatives. But he said, don't continue to tell children they can save the world by recycling pop cans. That's not going to do it. So the second thing is, be truthful with ourselves and our children about the seriousness of what's coming down the tubes in the next 10 to 20 years. This is not science fiction. And then he said the third thing we can do as a community is get politically active and be well informed. So that when you sit down with your local city councillors or your provincial politicians or your federal politicians, you are a source of knowledge and a source of passion. A lot of people left that talk that day feeling like they wanted to slit their throats. There were a lot of people going saying, I'm giving up teaching. What's the point? I was absolutely pumped. I said, this is incredible. This is like building Noah's Ark. Like we can do this. Look at the power of human ingenuity. When we get our backs against the wall and we know what's coming, what wouldn't you give to save the most precious person in your family? What wouldn't you give to save the most precious piece of habitat that you love and treasure? Man, I'd work my butt off for this. And that's exactly what I saw in this. This is probably the greatest quest we are handing our community and our society in the history of humankind. We have the opportunity to mitigate all of this stuff for the second half of the century and to perhaps leave our children and our grandchildren and their grandchildren a much more stable economy, and ecology for a healthy environment. So, I would like to ask Sophie to step up on stage here with me. I was at an Earth Day conference in Hamilton, Copps Coliseum. Thousands of children, thousands of kids. A local politician got up on stage and just diatribed all the sins of the earth and the horrible state of affairs, and you know, it's all going to be a catastrophe tomorrow. And then he stood there and he said, "Well, children," Sophie, look at me. There we go. "Well, children, we've really screwed this up. We've left you quite a mess. Go out there and save us." And that was the look. It was, what? There's like all these elementary school children going, "Me? I didn't cause this." And I got up on stage after and I said, if I ever hear another local politician stand up here and say that I'm putting the savior of the earth on the shoulders of elementary school children, I'm going to throw up on stage. It's not Sophie's job to go out and save this community. This is the reason we do what we do. We're going to be compost probably by the time most of these changes have come into play. But Sophie will be building her future and raising her family, and every decision we make today, she is going to turn around, hopefully, and be able to look at our memories and say, thank you, because she is the child of the future. We are the warriors and the warrior princesses. It's our job to take these skills and go out there and make them happen. It's our job to ask her, what are your wishes? What are your dreams? What do you want your Calgary to look like in the future? And then we take all of our skills and all of our learnings from all the mistakes we've made from all of our years, and we put all the good knowledge into practice. And then she looks at us one day and she says, thanks, Mom and Dad. Thanks, Carrie and Jeff. Thanks for trying your very best. With the best of knowledge we had at the time, with the best of resources we had at the time, with the best of support that we had at the time, thank you for trying. And I think we should all keep Sophie in mind as we go back to our communities and our businesses and our homes and say, okay, if we want to reduce Calgary's ecological footprint, if we want to envision a low carbon future for this community, let's do it. The Kielburger brothers, which you hopefully will study one day from Ontario, form now an international association. They have a great t-shirt that says, be the change you want to be. T-shirts are fabulous sloganers for rallying people together. In Ontario, before I left, I got invited to a conference where a little girl from one of the separate school boards had been asked to design a slogan for her school. And it was the separate school board. Her slogan was, and it's been adapted right across the city now, it doesn't take a miracle to save the earth. It takes a choice, one simple act at a time. Thank you.
We get to the so what question. What do we do now? Where do we go next? What's going to happen with the results of today? The Community Energy Initiative team with the city, together with the advisory group, will take all of the stuff that's emerged from today and roll it into a framework for charting our low carbon future. The hope with this is that it'll become something that all of you will reference. This is not just a document for the City of Calgary. This is something that all of you can look to for leadership, for direction, for some of these overarching things that all of our keynotes and all of our conversations today have talked about. It's about getting down to making something different, looking forward and doing something that is not the status quo, because that's not going to get us where we want to be. There will be connections with the World Energy Cities thing, as the Mayor talked about. Connections with Alberta Environment and the greenhouse gas plans. The action plans, the community greenhouse gas plans for the City of Calgary. Reducing footprint initiatives. The Calgary Economic Development effort to work on some of the business strategies that will integrate environmental issues. So there are a lot of things that are going to come out of this going forward. Essentially, that the team that I work with, what we come up with from today will be our work plan going forward in trying to create some common leadership. All the information we gathered today will be forwarded to you. As Carrie mentioned, the website will have all the PowerPoints up there, hopefully by Monday. It's going to take us a little longer than the weekend to acquiesce all that has happened today into a common document, but as soon as that's there, we'll forward that to you. And then there'll have to be some conversations about a rollout strategy for that. It has to be put into action with some traction. So it's not just another binder. Just by way of wrapping up, I wanted to thank SAIT. Jamie Bader has been our primary contact with SAIT in trying to make sure all the events together, worked with Chartwell Meals to get all the catering together. I thought the food today was pretty good. I was talking to Paul over here earlier, and he was enthusiastically asking me, how much did this cost to put on today? Well, it's not a lot of money, but we couldn't do it without the support of our corporate sponsorship, and ConocoPhillips Canada has been the one that's provided that. We would much rather spend the dollars that we have, both taxpayer dollars and sponsorship dollars, on the actions that come out of this, not on convening expensive meetings, which today has not been. Just wanted you to know that. Wanted to thank the keynote speakers. The keynote speakers were carefully selected to try and present you with some inspiration, with some challenges, with some new ways of thinking. And more on a personal note, I guess I mostly wanted to thank the team members that I work with. Kerry Booth is the project manager for this, and I think he's done a remarkable job in putting this whole thing together today. Thanks, Kerry. Amanda Brownlee, she's in the back there. Patrick Inglis, over here. Sue Haydock, who is also the volunteer coordinator queen. And Susan Stinson, a master of the computer. Steve and Vincent over here keep hiding behind the curtain, but they're running all the technology. And our Amber and Serena, our communications people. Stand up, there you go, yes. One of the things that Serena and Amber did this time with the media that were here today was they didn't give them information on print material. They gave it to them on data sticks or flash drives that ConocoPhillips provided. And it was interesting listening. I talked to a bunch of them and I said, was this okay with you? And they said, oh, it's fantastic, because I could use them over and over and over again. I said, well, how many times have you been given something like this from any kind of venture? All of them said, first time. Finally, thank you. We've had close to 300 people here at various points of today talking about charting Calgary's low-carbon future. We now have a whole bunch of information, but it only stays as information unless you and us work together to come up with some common future, and that's what we want to do. Thank you for coming today. Have a great weekend, and hopefully we'll get together to work soon. Thank you.